Hey there, dreamers, welcome back to Hypothetical, the cozy corner where we drift through the wonders of our world, softly and curiously. I'm so happy you've decided to spend a quiet moment, whether it's night, morning, or that calm in between, unwinding here with me. Tonight, or whenever this finds you, let's settle into the deep comfort of contemplation, much like easing into a favourite armchair after a long, meandering day. We'll unfurl our thoughts slowly, like ancient papyrus scrolls, revealing stories whispered across the ages, stories that invite more wondering than rushing to conclusion. Close your eyes for a moment, if you like, and simply let your mind float towards a place of profound stillness, a place where time seems to slow to a mere whisper. Imagine a vast expanse of golden ochre, stretching out beneath an enormous, impossibly blue sky. Feel the gentle warmth of an ancient sun upon your skin, a sun that has shone down upon this earth for countless millennia, watching eras unfold and recede like the turning tides. In this boundless landscape, the air itself feels imbued with history, carrying the phantom scents of dry earth, distant spices, and the timeless stillness that follows the desert wind as it settles. Now, within this quiet tableau, picture colossal forms emerging from the very bedrock, shaped not just by human hands, but seemingly by the earth itself. They rise with a stately majesty, organic extensions of the planet, as though the mountains had stretched upwards, pausing midway through some slow geologic exhale. These are monuments, yes, but more than that, they are silent sentinels, holding watch over sands that shift with the same languid rhythm that characterized their genesis. Imagine tracing a finger over their sun-baked surfaces, feeling the gentle undulations where countless grains of sand have polished and sculpted, feeling the silent dialogue between raw stone and the ceaseless breath of the wind. There is a profound, comforting mystery in things that endure, isn't there? Objects that have seen the waxing and waning of civilizations, the rise and fall of rivers, the quiet ballet of stars moving across an inky canvas, epoch after epoch. They speak not with words, but with their sheer presence, their weathered resilience. They ask us to consider the immensity of time itself, that deep river that flows endlessly, carrying away moments while leaving monuments anchored firmly in its current. And of all these enduring forms, few capture the imagination or embody this silent conversation with eternity, quite like the noble, enigmatic figure that rises from the desert plateau near a place we know as Giza. Picture, if you will, the gentle descent of evening light across this ancient landscape. The long shadows begin to stretch like lazy cats, softening the edges of the world. And as the sun dips lower, painting the horizon in hues of rose and lavender, the most astonishing shape comes into breathtaking relief. It is a being of stone, vast and imposing, yet somehow imbued with an extraordinary sense of calm, an immeasurable patience. Its body, massive and powerful, settles low upon the earth, a primal form of leonine strength. But from its shoulders rises something utterly unexpected, a human face, serene and thoughtful, gazing eternally eastward, as if lost in a profound contemplation of the dawn. This majestic creature, half beast, half man, rests within its rocky basin, an ancient consciousness etched in enduring stone. It watches, unflinching, as empires rise and crumble, as countless human dramas play out at its feet, generation after generation. It has seen the glint of ancient gold and the modern flash of digital screens. It has witnessed stars migrate across the night sky and heard the gentle sigh of the wind whisper tales of time immemorial through its deeply carved ears. When we look upon such a colossal entity fashioned with such an extraordinary blend of strength and introspection, our human minds naturally begin to formulate a question, a quiet, contemplative query that echoes in the vastness of the space around this monolithic form. It is the simple yet profound question of when. When did this patient sentinel first open its stony eyes to the morning sun? How many full moons have spun across its fixed gaze since it first came to be? What quiet hum of chisels and human endeavour first called it into being, and when did that hum fade into the silent dust of the desert? This particular stone giant, familiar yet perpetually mysterious, the Great Sphinx of Giza, carries a specific and widely accepted story of its genesis. Most of us, when we first encounter its image or its physical presence, are taught that it was crafted some 4,500 years ago, during the reign of an old kingdom pharaoh whose name echoes down through the corridors of time, Khafre. It is believed to have been carved from the very limestone of the plateau, a silent, monumental guardian for the pharaoh's nearby pyramid complex. And in this telling, the face we see is often identified as Khafre's own, a king immortalized in stone, blending royal authority with the raw power of the lion. This is a powerful and coherent narrative, weaving together the strands of a historical king, monumental architecture, and a discernible span of time. Yet sometimes the earth itself, the very stone that forms these ancient structures, carries a whisper of a different story. It holds within its textured surfaces, its deep-set layers, and its subtly eroded forms, clues that gently invite us to wonder if the sands of time might have perhaps swept over this venerable being for even longer than we've generally presumed. Imagine, if you will, the sheer weight of millennia, not just centuries. Picture the imperceptibly slow, yet inexorable processes of our planet, the persistent breath of the wind, laden with abrasive sand, sculpting, smoothing, and etching lines into the most durable of materials. Consider the power of water, falling softly but relentlessly, tracing pathways, softening contours, dissolving the hard edges of rock with an almost artistic patience. It is this gentle observation of the enduring work of natural forces, seen across immense geological timescales, that can sometimes suggest a story layered far deeper than our immediate historical records reveal. Think of a riverbed, polished smooth by eons of water flow, or a mountain range, softened by the ceaseless work of wind and rain, their stories written in the very stone they shed and shape. Now turn that observational gaze back to the Sphinx, this monumental silent watcher. When we look closely, not just with historical expectation, but with the patient eye of a geologist, a soft inquiry begins to stir within us. Do the lines, the forms, the deep erosion patterns that ripple across the Sphinx and its surrounding enclosure speak only of thousands of years of wind-blown sand, or might they, just subtly, be hinting at an even vaster canvas of time, reaching back further, into epochs less clearly recalled by our traditional histories, into ages where the very climate of Giza was quite different from the arid desert we know today? This is not a tale of debunking or sudden revelation, but rather a slow, thoughtful unwinding of possibilities, like peeling back delicate layers of an onion, each revealing a new aspect, a deeper scent. It's an invitation to consider the ancient world not as a fixed, rigid timeline, but as a fluid, breathing entity full of interconnected processes and deep, echoing timescales. And it's an opportunity to simply dwell, softly, on the tantalizing concept that some of our world's most enduring and cherished mysteries might be even older, even more profoundly woven into the very fabric of our planet than we ever dared to imagine. What if the stories written in stone and the stories passed down through human history don't always align perfectly? Which stories, then, does the Earth tell us in its own quiet geological language? And so we turn our gaze to a monumental riddle, silent and majestic, yet fraught with a compelling question: the Great Sphinx of Giza. Imagine, if you will, the gentle descent of evening upon the Giza plateau. The sun, a slow-burning ember sinking beneath the western horizon. The desert air, still warm from the day's relentless embrace, begins to cool, carrying the soft scent of dust and distant memories. In this serene light, the Sphinx seems to breathe, its colossal form rising from the very bedrock of the plateau, like a creature not carved, but coaxed from the earth itself. It is a being of profound duality, half lion, half human, eternally couched in watchfulness. Its vast leonine body stretches out across an expanse that could comfortably contain several modern homes, an immense repose of stone against the backdrop of shifting sands. The sheer scale is difficult to grasp until you stand before it, feeling a profound dwarfing of your own small stature. Then your eyes might drift upwards, past the powerful shoulders and the broad chest, to the upright human head, facing eastward as if eternally anticipating the dawn, awaiting a revelation whispered on the desert winds. This human face, crowned with the striped Nemes headdress, bears features worn smooth by countless millennia, an enigmatic smile perhaps, or merely the quiet wisdom of age. For generations since the meticulous rediscovery and scholarly focus on the Sphinx, its age has been tethered to the pharaoh Khafre. We've been taught that this colossal statue was conceived and carved during his reign, somewhere in the midst of the Fourth Dynasty, a time that whispers to us of approximately 2,500 years before the Common Era. It is a story woven into the very fabric of Egyptian archaeology. Khafre, the pharaoh whose pyramid looms nearby, commissioned this magnificent guardian, perhaps even imbuing the human face with his own regal likeness. The thought is elegant. It connects the Sphinx beautifully to the grand architectural ensemble of the Giza necropolis, a vast royal complex, complete with pyramids, temples, and causeways, all seemingly unified in purpose and design, a testament to an awe-inspiring era of Egyptian civilization. And for many years, this has been the accepted narrative, a foundational stone in our understanding of ancient Egypt. The evidence seemed to speak to it directly. The proximity of the Sphinx to Khafre's pyramid and valley temple, the shared geological trench out of which both the Sphinx and components of the temple appear to have been carved, suggesting a contiguous monumental construction project. Furthermore, the overall artistic style, to many eyes, aligns seamlessly with other examples from the Fourth Dynasty. The scale of the work, while immense, fit within what we know of the resources, manpower, and organizational capabilities of the Old Kingdom pharaohs. To question this age felt almost sacrilegious, a deviation from the well-trodden paths of accepted wisdom. But the earth, in its vast, patient wisdom, sometimes offers its own voice, whispering truths through the very stones themselves. Truths that can challenge our most carefully constructed timelines. This whisper began not in an ancient text or a newly unearthed artifact, but in the observation of how the stone itself has weathered, how the ceaseless, slow breath of time has sculpted its form in ways that invite us to reconsider its deep past. Let us step closer now, leaving the vast overview and drawing our attention to the very substance of the Sphinx. Imagine reaching out a hand not to touch, but to observe, tracing the ancient contours, feeling, through your eyes, the texture of the stone that forms its body. It is not the dense, hard granite resilience of some obelisks, nor the compact basalt favoured for statues that stand sharp-edged across millennia. No, the body of the Great Sphinx is carved predominantly from a relatively soft, porous limestone. This isn't a homogeneous block, but a tapestry of different densities, layered like the sedimentary pages in an immense geological book. Softer layers alternate with slightly more resilient ones, a composition that tells a story all its own, particularly when faced with the relentless whisper of the elements. As your gaze sweeps across the magnificent flanks and deep-set recesses of the Sphinx's body, something remarkable emerges from the patterns of wear and tear. You begin to notice deep vertical fissures, channels cut deep into the rock. There are wave-like undulations, grooves that seem to have been sculpted by a powerful, sustained flow. These aren't just superficial abrasions. They are substantial, creating deep gullies and rounded hollows that carve into the very essence of the rock. It is a pattern that speaks not of sharp-edged exfoliation or the abrasive grind of wind-borne sand, but of something altogether different. Consider for a moment the nature of desert erosion. In the arid climes that have dominated the Giza Plateau for the greater part of the last 5,000 years, the primary sculptor of stone has been the wind, laden with its endlessly driven cargo of sand. The abrasive force of sand blasting tends to create horizontal lines, sharp undercuts where softer layers are eaten away beneath harder ones, forming distinct overhangs. It results in differential erosion, creating a pitted, sand-blasted texture that can appear sharp, crisp, or even crumbly. But the prominent erosion marks on the body of the Sphinx, and within its surrounding enclosure, tell a different tale, a deeply arresting geological narrative. They are notably vertical, rounded, undulating, a texture that seems to sing of the persistent sheeting action of vast amounts of liquid. They look, to the trained eye, like the telltale signature of water erosion, and this perhaps is where the ancient whisper deepens into a more pronounced call. If these magnificent marks are indeed the work of water, of rain, of rivers flowing across its surface, then we are compelled to ask a most profound question. When did significant rainfall occur on the Giza Plateau? When did this arid land experience conditions wet enough, for long enough, to carve such distinctive and extensive features into a colossal stone monument? To answer this, we must cast our minds back, far beyond the dynasties of pharaohs, far beyond the earliest cities, to a time when the very climate of this region was utterly transformed. Picture the Giza Plateau, not as the sun-scorched desert we know today, but as a verdant landscape. Imagine it covered not with dunes, but with grasslands, savannas stretching to the horizon, dotted with trees and nourished by seasonal rivers. Visualize streams meandering through valleys that are now bone-dry wadis, and seasonal monsoon-like rains, heavy and insistent, sheeting down from dark, swollen skies. This was not merely an occasional shower, but sustained periods of wet weather, cycles of ample rainfall over hundreds, perhaps thousands, of years. Such a pluvial period did indeed exist in this region. Geologists and climate scientists have meticulously reconstructed the ancient climates of North Africa, discerning distinct epochs of environmental change. We know that following the last great ice age, which concluded around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, there was a dramatic shift in global weather patterns. As the vast glaciers of the north receded, the monsoonal belt in Africa, which today primarily influences regions further south, extended its reach northward. For several millennia, beginning perhaps around 12,000 to 10,000 years before our present day, and lasting until roughly 6,000 years ago, what is now the Sahara Desert was a much wetter, greener place. This was a vast green Sahara, a mosaic of lush savannas and wooded areas, capable of sustaining rich flora and fauna. Large lakes formed in depressions that are now parched salt flats. It was a time when hippos wallowed in waterholes where today only sand reigns. During these wetter millennia, the Giza Plateau would have experienced substantial rainfall. Not merely scattered drizzles, but periods of consistent, heavy precipitation. Enough for runoff, enough for torrents of water to sheet down hillsides, accumulating force as they carved pathways into the soft limestone. Imagine these rains, year after year, century after century, ceaselessly washing over the colossal form of the Sphinx, its body absorbing the impact, the weaker layers of stone dissolving, particles carried away by the flowing water, little by little, sculpting the very forms we see today. It is this slow, deliberate, liquid force that can explain the rounded contours, the vertical channels, the deep, wavy erosion, that seems so out of place in our modern understanding of desert landscapes. And crucially, if we place the carving of the Sphinx within the conventional time frame of Pharaoh Khafre around 4,500 years ago, the climatic data presents a powerful discrepancy. By Khafre's era, the Green Sahara was in its rapid decline. The region was already transitioning rapidly into the hyper-arid desert conditions that persist to this day. There would simply not have been sufficient periods of sustained, heavy rainfall to account for the magnitude of water erosion evident on the Sphinx. The sculpting marks are too profound, too extensive, to have occurred in the comparatively brief wet spells or sporadic heavy rains that might have punctuated the increasingly dry landscape during the Old Kingdom. No, the sheer depth and character of the erosion argue eloquently for exposure to rain for thousands of years before Khafre, pushing its possible age back into a profound antiquity, to a time that predates our traditional narratives of complex civilization. Consider another fascinating aspect. The Sphinx is not merely an isolated statue. It sits in a massive enclosure, a bathtub carved from the bedrock, designed to highlight and frame the magnificent beast. The walls of this enclosure, particularly the eastern and northern walls, which receive the full force of precipitation, bear the exact same signature of water erosion as the Sphinx's body. These vertical channels and deep scallops are etched into the rock with an unmistakable consistency. If the Sphinx itself endured these ancient rains, so too did its meticulously crafted pit. This symmetrical pattern of weathering, evident across the Sphinx's body and its enclosure walls, strengthens the argument that both were exposed to the same prolonged periods of significant rainfall, long before the sands truly swallowed this land. And then there is the riddle of the Sphinx's head. As you look up towards the human face, it is almost striking how relatively well preserved it appears compared to the body. While still showing the passage of millennia, its features are more defined, its lines sharper, its erosion distinct from the body's deeply fluted pattern. It is also proportionately somewhat smaller than one might expect for a creature of such massive leonine bulk. This visual discrepancy has given rise to a compelling hypothesis. Perhaps the head we see today is not the original head of the Sphinx. Imagine a much older creation, perhaps a fully leonine creature, a magnificent lion resting upon the plateau, its head eroded by countless millennia of wind and sporadic, yet effective weathering from an ancient sun and ancient air. Its head might have suffered more intense degradation over those earlier eons, due to its higher elevation and different geological composition or original carving detail. Then, thousands of years later, perhaps during the Old Kingdom of Egypt, a new purpose was found for this ancient, weathered colossus. What if pharaonic sculptors, marvelling at the colossal lion, decided to undertake a colossal renovation? They might have carved away the heavily weathered original leonine head, which would have been proportionate to its immense body, and instead sculpted the current, distinctly human, pharaonic face we observe today. This act of recarving would necessitate reducing the overall size of the head, thereby contributing to its slightly disproportionate appearance. Crucially, the stone used for the human head seems to be of a harder, more resistant quality, possibly carved from a higher stratum of bedrock that endured less primary water erosion than the softer, more porous layers below that form the body. The erosion on the face is largely wind-blown, abrasive in nature, consistent with thousands of years of desert conditions, but not bearing the profound vertical scalloping seen on the body. This dual evidence, a heavily water-eroded body suggesting immense antiquity, and a seemingly recarved head exhibiting more typical desert erosion, intertwines into a potent argument for an origin far earlier than Khufu or Khafre. This idea evokes powerful images. Consider the meticulous effort it would have taken to resculpt such a colossal form. Artisans working at impossible heights, carefully chiseling away at the millennia-worn stone, transforming a weathered beast into a royal icon. The thought alone paints a vivid picture of human ingenuity across epochs, of a reverence for older works that led not to their destruction, but their transformation and integration into a new era's symbolism. The original purpose of the full lion might have been lost to time, but its formidable presence endured, offering a foundation upon which a later, glorious civilization could impress its own identity. This notion, however, inevitably leads us to ponder another immense question. If the Great Sphinx indeed dates back to the wet period of the Sahara, to a time perhaps between 10,000 and 7,000 years ago, what civilization possessed the technical capability, the social organization, the artistic vision, and the sheer audacity to carve such a monument? It is a period for which our conventional archaeological records are remarkably sparse. We find hunter-gatherer societies, emerging agricultural communities, but no clear evidence of the complex, stratified cultures typically associated with monumental construction on this scale. Our existing understanding of history struggles to reconcile such an ancient date with the recognized capabilities of those pre-dynastic eras. Yet the silence of the Sphinx persists. It offers no easy answers. The stone simply speaks of the forces that shaped it, allowing us to interpret its geological tale. The arguments presented by those who lean towards an older Sphinx are founded on these earth-based observations. The specific patterns of erosion on its body and its enclosure walls point insistently towards prolonged water exposure. The geological evidence of a once wet Sahara provides the environmental context for such exposure, and the contrasting erosion of its head suggests a later modification. These are not minor details. They are geological narratives etched in stone, narratives that command us to listen carefully and perhaps to reevaluate our long-held assumptions. The traditional archaeological understanding holds firmly that the monumental projects of Giza emerged from the Old Kingdom, that the very technologies and societal structures capable of moving such stone, organizing such labor, arose within the context of dynastic Egypt. The idea of a previous, equally capable, and even older civilization is a tantalizing one, a whisper from deep antiquity, yet one for which concrete architectural evidence, other than the Sphinx itself, remains largely elusive within the immediate vicinity. This paradox is precisely what makes the Great Sphinx such an enduring enigma. It seems to stand on a fault line between accepted history and the silent testimony of the earth. And so the majestic creature remains, couched eternally upon the plateau, a silent sentinel, contemplating the rising sun. Its ancient gaze, weathered by eons, continues to hold a profound secret, inviting us to look not just at its form, but at the very patterns etched into its essence. It reminds us that history is not always written in scrolls or inscribed on temple walls, but sometimes, most enduringly, in the very stone of our planet, carved by forces so patient, so powerful, that they defy our transient understanding of time itself. The question of the Sphinx's age lingers, suspended in the soft desert air, a puzzle piece that demands not just to fit into our current understanding, but perhaps to reshape the edges of the picture itself. It urges us to venture deeper, to examine the intricate details of its past, not merely with our assumptions, but with eyes wide open to all possibilities, no matter how profound their implications. And so we turn our gaze from the present dust that swirls around its silent form, back into the deep currents of time itself. Imagine for a moment the world as it was, not centuries, but millennia ago. The very ground beneath our feet, which now feels so firm and unchanging, has always been a canvas for forces beyond our fleeting human perception. The wind whispers tales of change, the sand sifts through the hourglass of ages, and the stones themselves hold secrets pressed deep within their crystalline structures. Our journey into the Sphinx's antiquity truly begins in the cool shade of prevailing archaeological understanding, which offers a powerful and deeply researched narrative. Picture, if you will, the Plateau of Giza, not as a tourist destination, but as a vast natural quarry, gleaming under the harsh North African sun. The Old Kingdom, a time of awe-inspiring architectural ambition, pulsates with life and ingenuity. Here, amid the construction of colossal pyramids that scrape the very heavens, the idea of the Great Sphinx is traditionally thought to have taken shape. We settle into the soft warmth of a historical morning, perhaps somewhere around 2500 BC. The air would have carried the sharp tang of freshly cut stone, the murmur of thousands of voices, the rhythmic beat of hammers against chisels, and the groans of immense blocks being moved across sand and ramps. The sun, as always, rose over the eastern horizon, casting long dark shadows from the half-built wonders. It is within this monumental endeavour, so the conventional understanding suggests, that a singular, colossal outcropping of limestone was noticed. Not just any outcropping, but one that seemed perhaps to hint at a form already dormant within the rock itself, the noble, watchful body of a lion. For generations, the widely accepted wisdom has anchored the Great Sphinx firmly in the reign of the 4th dynasty pharaoh, Khafre. This pharaoh, whose own pyramid stands grandly beside the Sphinx, is traditionally believed to be the individual who commanded this monumental effigy into existence. His face, serene and idealized, is thought to be the very one we see gazing stoically towards the rising sun. The evidence, patiently gathered and analyzed by countless scholars over more than a century, forms a coherent and compelling story, woven from the threads of material culture, textual inference, and the proximity of the monuments themselves. Consider the landscape as it might have appeared to Khafre's overseers and artisans. The massive stones for his pyramid were being quarried, and, as they stripped away layers of the natural bedrock, a significant ridge of layered limestone emerged. This ridge, tougher and more durable than the surrounding softer rock, was left in situ. Rather than simply quarrying it away, or incorporating it into a ramp, the genius of the age conceived of a different destiny for this magnificent geological feature. It would become something unique, a guardian carved directly from the earth. The very process of excavating around it to free the colossal shape of the lion provided the necessary material for the core of the Sphinx temple and the adjacent Khafre Valley temple, reinforcing the narrative of a singular, interconnected construction project. Imagine the scores of stonemasons, their hands roughened by toil, their bodies hardened by the desert elements, slowly peeling back the outer layers of the limestone. We might envision them working from the top down, a strategy often employed in monumental carving, allowing gravity to assist in the removal of massive quantities of rock. The long, low body of the lion would have gradually emerged first, its powerful paws stretching out towards the east. Then, rising from the natural crest of the rock, the magnificent head would have begun to take form. Perhaps rough-hewn at first, awaiting the meticulous detail of the finest sculptors. The limestone of the Giza Plateau is not uniform. It consists of layers, like an ancient cake, each stratum with its own hardness and texture. The lowest parts of the Sphinx, its broad, powerful body, are carved from the tougher, more resilient layers, sometimes referred to as Member 2 limestone by geologists. As the sculpture rises, reaching the neck and head, the quality of the stone shifts, becoming somewhat softer, more susceptible to the ravages of time. This inherent variation in the rock would have presented both challenges and opportunities to the ancient carvers, dictating in subtle ways how the colossal form could best be expressed. The association with Khafre rests not just on the proximity of his pyramid, but also on architectural and stylistic details. The Sphinx sits as part of an integrated complex that includes the Sphinx Temple and the Khafre Valley Temple, which are intimately connected by a causeway leading up to Khafre's pyramid. The design elements and construction methods of these temples mirror those found within Khafre's other structures, particularly the use of massive core blocks encased in granite veneers, characteristic of his reign. Further reinforcing this link, fragments of statuary bearing Khafre's likeness have been found within these connected temples, gently hinting at the pharaoh's dominion over this grand creation. The face of the Sphinx itself has long been examined for clues. Comparing its features, the strong jawline, the somewhat wide face, the royal Nem's headdress, and the characteristic false beard, fragments of which were found at its base and now reside in museums. With known statues of Khafre, many Egyptologists discern a clear and convincing resemblance. It is as if the pharaoh wished to immortalize his own visage in this immense, enigmatic beast, combining his human form with the potent symbolism of the lion, a creature of immense strength, royal power, and guardianship. This merging of human intelligence with animalistic might would have spoken volumes to the ancient Egyptian mind about kingship and cosmic order. Consider, too, the purpose. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs were often seen as incarnations or manifestations of divine power. A sphinx, particularly one with the face of the reigning monarch, would serve as a powerful emblem of the king's spiritual and physical might, his watchful guardianship over his sacred domain, and his role as an intermediary between the earthly and the divine. The eastward gaze towards the rising sun speaks to rebirth, to eternal vigilance, and perhaps to the pharaoh's journey into the afterlife, eternally linked to the dawn. It is a protector, a sentinel of profound significance, standing testament to the pharaoh's authority for all time. However, the passage of millennia is relentless, and even the toughest stone succumbs to its slow embrace. By the time of the New Kingdom, many centuries after its initial carving, the Sphinx was already a deeply venerated, yet partly forgotten and sand-swallowed relic. Its true history may have faded into legend for a time. The powerful winds of the desert, ceaselessly carrying grains of sand, buried its lower parts beneath vast dunes. Imagine the slow accumulation, year after year, century after century, as the relentless desert reclaimed its own. Then, a flicker of its former glory emerged from the sands during the 18th dynasty. A young prince, who would later become Pharaoh Thutmose IV, fell asleep in the Sphinx's shadow while on a hunting expedition. As legend has it, the Sphinx appeared to him in a dream, promising him the throne of Egypt if he would clear the sand from its majestic form. Thutmose, upon becoming king, fulfilled his vow, meticulously excavating the Sphinx and placing between its paws a carved stone slab, the Dream Stela. This stela recounts his dream and confirms the cleaning effort, providing valuable, albeit later, historical insight into how the Sphinx was viewed and managed long after its supposed initial creation. The stela refers to the Sphinx as Hora Maket, or Horus in the horizon, highlighting its divine association as a form of the sun god. This act of restoration shows that even then, the Sphinx's exact origins might have been shrouded in some mists of antiquity for the general populace, though its sanctity remained profound. This carefully constructed narrative, the one so many of us learned in school and through documentaries, feels complete. It fits seamlessly into the chronology of the Old Kingdom, connecting directly to one of its greatest pharaohs and forming a visually and symbolically unified complex. The sheer scale of the Sphinx and its surrounding temples certainly aligns with the monumental aspirations of the Fourth Dynasty, a period of unprecedented achievement in Egyptian art and architecture. To deny this long-held view is to challenge decades, indeed centuries, of painstaking research and understanding by scholars dedicated to deciphering the profound story of ancient Egypt. And yet, a gentle tremor sometimes runs through the quiet sands of established knowledge. The very stillness of the Sphinx seems to invite questions, its unblinking gaze perhaps hinting at deeper layers of forgotten history. stories etched not in papyrus or stela, but in the enduring, patient stone itself. Could it be that the story we know, while robust, is but one chapter in a much grander, more ancient tale? The Sphinx, like any truly great mystery, possesses an allure that reaches beyond simple explanation, prompting some to delve deeper, to seek out those faint echoes from an earlier time. This takes us to a quieter observation point, away from the bustling Old Kingdom construction sites, and closer to the very fabric of the earth, where the Sphinx truly makes its deep statements. Imagine standing now, not as an archaeologist deciphering texts, but as a geologist with a keen eye for the silent testimony of rock formations. The sun might still be overhead, but its light seems to draw out subtle nuances in the stone, grooves and undulations that tell a story very different from the smooth chisel marks of the artisan. It began as a geological observation, seemingly innocuous, yet carrying the potential to unravel centuries of accepted wisdom. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, John Anthony West, an independent Egyptologist, first drew serious public attention to certain anomalous erosion patterns on the Sphinx and its enclosure walls. These patterns, he suggested, were not what one would expect from millennia of relentless wind and sand. He then enlisted the expertise of Dr. Robert Schoch, a tenured professor of geology at Boston University, a scientist known for his rigorous analysis of rock and earth formations. Picture the Sphinx enclosure now, its immense walls hewn from the natural bedrock surrounding the Sphinx itself, rising in a kind of hollowed-out basin. Take a slow, contemplative walk along these walls, particularly the northern and southern sides. Observe the patterns on the limestone surface. The eye, once accustomed, begins to distinguish subtle differences. We often imagine the desert environment as relentlessly swept by abrasive sands, carried on the powerful gusts of wind. Wind erosion, what geologists call aeolian erosion, tends to carve and sculpt horizontally, creating ripples, undercuts and polishing effects, especially closer to the ground where the sand blast is most potent. Over time, in such a dry, arid environment, the soft limestone would ideally be scoured into fine-grained horizontal striations, like fine brushstrokes following the contours of the prevailing wind direction. But what Dr. Schoch observed, and what you might discern with patient looking, is different. These particular erosion features on the enclosure walls are predominantly vertical. They are undulating, channel-like features, often quite deep and distinct, that seem to run downward, sometimes converging, sometimes branching, like countless little rivers coursing over a surface. These are not sharp, angular carvings left by the artisan's tool. No, these are soft, rounded, flowing profiles, creating a scalloped, almost wave-like pattern across the rock face. Think for a moment about how water behaves on stone. When raindrops fall, they impact the surface, and if they gather in sufficient quantity, they begin to trickle and flow downwards, carrying away loosened particles. Over extended periods, these trickles, following the path of least resistance or tiny imperfections in the rock, can carve out precise channels and grooves. Imagine sheet erosion, where water spreads broadly, softening the surface, and then concentrating its flow in certain areas, patiently carving these very characteristic vertical runnels. This is the unmistakable signature of long-term precipitation, of significant sustained rainfall, water, not wind, being the dominant weathering agent. This visual evidence is crucial. While wind can abrade and degrade rock, it simply does not produce these specific kinds of vertical channels, these flowing, undulating curves, on the scale seen on the Sphinx enclosure walls. Furthermore, the base of the Sphinx, also carved from softer limestone, exhibits similar patterns. It is as if the colossal guardian has borne witness not just to sandstorms, but to seasons of steady, patient rain that slowly, painstakingly carved its deeper story into the stone. Which brings us to the profound implication of these geological observations. When did such substantial persistent rainfall last occur in the region of Giza? Today, the climate of Egypt is famously hyper-arid. Rainfall is sparse, almost negligible, occurring only in brief localized events. Such a climate is primarily conducive to wind erosion, not the profound water erosion observed. To understand the timescale involved, we must embark on a brief journey into paleoclimatology, the study of Earth's ancient climates. The Sahara Desert, this vast imposing landscape of sand and stone, has not always been the desolate expanse we know. Over the last several 100,000 years, due to predictable, cyclical shifts in the Earth's orbit and tilt, known as Milankovitch cycles, the Sahara has undergone dramatic transformations, oscillating between periods of extreme aridity and periods of relative lushness, often referred to as green Sahara phases or African humid periods. Imagine, then, a world significantly different from today, not a sudden dramatic change, but a slow, unfolding shift in the global atmospheric engine. Around 12,000 to 10,000 years ago, following the last major ice age, a gradual warming trend and changes in Earth's axial tilt caused the monsoon rains, which today nourish Central Africa, to migrate northwards. This brought a sustained period of heavy summer monsoons and rainfall to regions that are now stark desert. It wasn't a tropical rainforest, perhaps, but certainly a savanna-like environment, teeming with life, punctuated by seasonal rains and rivers, with trees and grasses sustaining vast herds of animals. Early human populations flourished in these wetter climes, leaving behind tantalizing evidence of their presence in the form of rock art depicting giraffes, elephants, and hippos. Creatures utterly foreign to today's arid Sahara, this African humid period lasted, with some fluctuations, until roughly 5,000 to 4,500 years ago, or approximately 3,000 to 2,500 BC, when the monsoonal patterns began to retreat southwards again, gradually leading to the desertification of the Sahara we now experience. It is only after this period, when the climate became consistently arid, that significant aeolian, wind, erosion became the dominant force in the Giza region. So, if the significant water erosion observed on the Sphinx and its enclosure walls requires millennia of sustained, substantial rainfall, then the carving of these structures must predate the onset of the current arid conditions. Dr. Skoch's geological analysis suggests that this intense precipitation event largely ended around 5,000 years ago. This pushes the potential carving of the Sphinx not just a few centuries, but several millennia before the traditional Old Kingdom date of around 2500 BC. He suggested a date anywhere from 7000 BC to 5000 BC, an age that would place it firmly within a prehistoric era, long before the rise of dynastic Egypt, before the pharaohs, and before even the concept of monumental stone architecture as we understand it from other ancient civilizations. This proposed shift in chronology from approximately 4,500 years old to perhaps 7,000, 12,000 years old is staggering in its implications. It asks us to rethink not just the origin of one monument, but the entire timeline of advanced civilization in the Nile Valley. If the Sphinx predates the Old Kingdom, who carved it? What society possessed the sophisticated organization, engineering knowledge, and sheer manpower to achieve such a feat thousands of years before the pharaohs began their great pyramid-building projects? These questions reverberate deeply, prompting both fierce resistance from conventional scholars and enthusiastic investigation from those who champion alternative perspectives. Now, a quiet counter-argument naturally arises, reminding us of the immense weight of prevailing archaeological consensus. Some mainstream geologists and Egyptologists contend that while water erosion certainly occurs on limestone, it may not necessarily require such an ancient date. They argue that intermittent, intense rainfall events could still have contributed to some vertical weathering even in a generally arid climate. However, the geological counterpoint emphasizes that sporadic downpours, while possibly causing some erosion, do not account for the deep, pervasive, and widespread nature of the vertical channels observed. This specific type of weathering points to sustained saturation over long periods, the kind of climate that simply hasn't existed in Giza for thousands of years within the conventional time frame. The type of erosion, its depth, and its uniformity over a vast rock surface remains a potent part of the argument for a much older origin. Moreover, if one proposes that Khafre commissioned the Sphinx, yet the visible erosion requires earlier, sustained wet periods, how do we reconcile this? Did the Old Kingdom pharaoh simply inherit an already heavily eroded natural outcrop, one that they then carved into the Sphinx? This seems less likely for such a prestigious project meant to immortalize the king. The act of carving usually means taking a relatively pristine or newly exposed rock surface and shaping it, for the deep channels to be present, and then incorporated into a sphinx carved in the Old Kingdom, suggests that the erosion happened to the raw bedrock that the sphinx later emerged from, which doesn't negate the climate evidence but alters the sequence slightly, raising even more questions about the initial intent or the state of the chosen rock. The challenge posed by the water erosion hypothesis thus forces a fascinating crossroads between geology and archaeology, disciplines that usually operate on distinct methodologies. Geology reads the deep time preserved in stone, climate patterns shifting over epochs. Archaeology traditionally deciphers human intent and culture through artifacts, inscriptions, and construction methods. The Sphinx, standing at this juncture, demands that these different lenses be applied, creating a more comprehensive, yet deeply complex, portrait of its possible history, which gently brings us to the fascinating pursuit of what lies beneath. Imagine the subtle thrum of specialized instruments, not chisels or mallets, but devices that send sound waves deep into the earth. Picture geophysicists, not so much looking at the surface, but probing the hidden layers, the silent structures nestled in the bedrock far beneath the mighty pores and flowing sands. The notion that there might be chambers or secret passages associated with the Sphinx, hidden from plain sight, has captivated explorers and theorists for centuries. This deep dive into the hidden realms often stems from various threads of ancient prophecy, esoteric teachings, and compelling observations. The sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce for instance, spoke in his trance readings of a hall of records located beneath the Sphinx, containing ancient knowledge of a lost civilization. While Cayce's pronouncements are not archaeological evidence in themselves, they did inspire interest and some exploration efforts by his followers, spurring early investigations into the substrata. More scientific investigations, however, employed geophysical techniques that peer beneath the Earth without disturbing it. Among these, seismic surveys are particularly illuminating. Imagine tapping the Earth's surface and listening to the echoes that return. Just as sonar uses sound to map the ocean floor, seismic waves, generated by small, controlled impacts or vibrations, travel through the ground, bouncing off different materials. The way these waves propagate and reflect provides geophysicists with a kind of internal X-ray of the subsurface, revealing density changes, discontinuities, and potential structures. In the 1990s, Dr. Frady Propper's Thomas de Becky, a geophysicist, collaborated with Dr. Schock and others on seismic refraction surveys around the Sphinx. Picture this precise, delicate work. Instruments laid out across the bedrock, sensors listening intently, picking up the faintest reverberations. The goal was to identify anomalies, areas where the wave velocities changed unexpectedly, suggesting different densities of rock or even empty spaces. Their findings were intriguing. The seismic data, while complex and subject to interpretation, did reveal certain anomalies or unusual patterns in the bedrock, particularly around the Sphinx's left northern pore and to the northeast of the Sphinx itself. One notable anomaly suggested the presence of a room or chamber, roughly rectangular some meters beneath the surface. It wasn't definitively an open chamber, but an area of significantly less dense material than the surrounding solid bedrock. Perhaps a cavity, a looser infill, or a natural void. Imagine the whisper of possibilities this raises. Could these anomalies represent deliberately carved chambers, now possibly filled with sediment, long forgotten, or perhaps still awaiting discovery? The mainstream explanation tends towards geological explanations, natural solution cavities, softer pockets of limestone, or even ancient natural fissures in the bedrock. Yet, the precise rectilinear nature of some of these anomalies in the data does, for some, hint at something more organized, more intentionally shaped. Other studies, employing similar geophysical techniques, like ground-penetrating radar, which sends electromagnetic waves into the ground to detect changes in resistivity, have also hinted at subterranean features around the Sphinx. While these technologies offer invaluable insights, it's vital to remember their limitations. They detect differences in material density. They don't provide a direct visual image of what's there. Interpreting the squiggly lines and colorful charts requires expertise, careful analysis, and often educated inference. A void detected could be a naturally eroded cave, an ancient storage pit, or a sealed chamber of unknown purpose. Each new discovery fuels both excitement and intense debate. The significance of these potential hidden structures goes hand in hand with the water erosion hypothesis. If the Sphinx truly is millennia older than previously thought, then the possibility of it belonging to a hitherto unknown, highly capable civilization becomes more tangible. Such a civilization might have engaged in subterranean architecture, not just surface monuments, perhaps utilizing natural caverns or creating man-made ones. These chambers could have held anything from ritualistic objects to, indeed, records or sacred texts from that ancient epoch. The thought, even if speculative, is utterly captivating. Consider the human impulse to hide things, to preserve knowledge. If an advanced culture faced cataclysmic climate shifts or societal collapse, would they not seek to protect their most vital insights, their histories, their wisdom from oblivion? The enduring stone beneath a silent guardian might have been chosen as the ultimate sanctuary. Yet, we must temper these grand imaginings with careful contemplation. For centuries, Egyptologists have explored around, under, and within Egyptian monuments. While incredible discoveries are still made, the more overt or accessible structures have generally been mapped and investigated. The deeper, more elusive rooms might be challenging to reach without invasive and potentially damaging archaeological digs, which are often avoided around such sacred and monumental sites, unless there is truly overwhelming evidence. The scientific process demands patience, verification, and ethical preservation, even when curiosity burns brightest. The Sphinx continues to hold its subterranean secrets close, allowing only faint echoes to rise to the surface, inviting us to ponder the possibilities in respectful silence. As we gently transition our attention from the secrets buried beneath the sand to the profound mysteries encoded in the heavens, imagine stepping out onto the Giza Plateau on a truly dark, moonless night. The silence is profound, broken only by the soft whisper of the desert breeze. Above, the sky unfurls like an immense velvet curtain, studded with countless diamond-like stars, tracing paths across the celestial sphere with an ancient, unchanging rhythm. For countless generations, humanity has gazed at this cosmic canvas, seeking patterns, meaning, and a reflection of its earthly existence. Ancient Egyptians, among many other early cultures, were meticulous sky watchers. The rhythms of the Nile, the agricultural cycles, and the very concept of divine order were deeply intertwined with astronomical observation. The rising and setting of celestial bodies, particularly the sun and certain prominent stars, were seen as manifestations of the divine, guiding daily life and informing the construction of sacred spaces. Is it possible, then, that the Sphinx, this immense and deliberate creation, also encodes a celestial message, a marker pointing to a far distant past. This particular theory gained prominence through the work of authors like Robert Bovell, particularly with his Orion correlation theory, which, though primarily focused on the Giza Pyramid's alignment with Orion's belt, also touched upon the Sphinx's astronomical significance. The core idea, which dates back much earlier in more general forms, suggests that the Sphinx is aligned, not just geographically, but astronomically, to a specific epoch. Picture the majestic Sphinx, sitting low on the horizon, its colossal gaze fixed directly eastward. Its orientation is precisely set towards the rising sun on the spring equinox. The equinox is a moment of profound cosmic balance, when day and night are of equal length, heralding the start of new seasons. It's a natural calendar marker, significant for many cultures. The fact that the Sphinx faces this precise celestial event is hardly coincidental. It speaks to intentional design, an embedding of astronomical knowledge into its very being. Now, consider the profound and slow dance of the heavens known as the precession of the equinoxes. This concept requires a patient unfolding of understanding, as it happens so gradually that it is imperceptible in a human lifetime. Yet it reshapes the apparent night sky over millennia. Imagine the Earth spinning like a top, but this top isn't perfectly steady. It has a slight wobble, a slow, majestic gyration. This wobble causes the direction of Earth's axis, the imaginary line it spins on, to slowly shift in space, describing a vast circle over approximately 26,000 years. This motion doesn't change the tilt of the Earth, which gives us our seasons, but it does change the point in the distant stellar background against which the sun appears to rise on the spring equinox. To put it more simply, today, on the spring equinox, the sun rises in the constellation Pisces, moving into Aquarius, signaling the age of Aquarius. But because of the Earth's precessional wobble, about 2,000 years ago, on the spring equinox, the sun rose against the background of the constellation Aries. Go back further, another 2,000 years or so, and it would have risen against Taurus. And a further 2,000 years before that, around 10,500 BC to 8,500 BC, the sun would have risen in the background of the constellation Leo on the spring equinox. And here lies the crux of the astronomical argument for the Sphinx's ancient age. The Sphinx itself is a zoomorphic figure, the body of a lion. If we combine its physical form, lion, with its eastward alignment towards the spring equinox sun, a fascinating synchronicity emerges. For the spring equinox sun to rise in the astrological age of Leo, meaning the background constellation on the equinox was Leo, we must go back to that time frame of roughly 10,500 BC to 8,500 BC. Picture the sky as it would have looked in that distant era, as the sun's first rays would have kissed the eastern horizon on the vernal equinox. A vast shimmering constellation of a lion, Leo, would have stood directly behind it, momentarily obscured by its light. The Sphinx, this enormous terrestrial lion, would be gazing directly into its celestial counterpart, a perfect, powerful mirror of earthly and cosmic identity. This alignment, some argue, is too profound, too precise, to be mere coincidence. It suggests that the builders of the Sphinx had a sophisticated understanding of precessional astronomy and deliberately placed their monument to mark a specific, sacred cosmic moment in time. The implications, again, are immense. An alignment with the age of Leo around 10,500 BC places the Sphinx firmly within the Younger Dryas period and directly correlates with the much earlier dates suggested by the water erosion hypothesis. It speaks of a sophisticated culture, not merely in engineering, but in profound astronomical observation, one that existed thousands of years before what we typically call civilization. It hints at an understanding of long-term cosmic cycles, a level of knowledge and foresight not usually attributed to cultures of that very early epoch. However, as with any grand hypothesis that challenges deeply entrenched narratives, critiques and counter-arguments surface, reminding us of the subtle complexities involved in decoding ancient knowledge. Mainstream Egyptologists often point out that the constellations as we know them today are Hellenistic in origin. Influenced by Greek astronomy, the ancient Egyptians had their own star maps and groupings, which did not always directly correspond to modern constellations like Leo. So, assigning a specific age of Leo to ancient Egyptian builders based on a later, imported constellation system is seen as anachronistic by some. They might argue that the Sphinx, as a lion, simply embodies a general symbol of strength and royalty common throughout Egyptian history, and its eastward alignment is simply practical for a guardian greeting the new day. Yet proponents of the older Sphinx argue back, emphasizing that while constellation names may change, the underlying star patterns themselves remain constant. The ancient Egyptians certainly recognized prominent star groups that correspond to what we now call Leo, regardless of the precise name they used. The very fact that the Sphinx is a lion man suggests a deep symbolic connection to that animal, and its deliberate astronomical orientation should not be dismissed as coincidence. The confluence of geological evidence for sustained rain in the period 10,000 BC to 5,000 BC and the astronomical alignment to 10,500 BC provides for some a powerful, mutually reinforcing argument for the Sphinx's deep antiquity. This leads us to consider the powerful cultural memory that might have survived through these vast epochs. If an earlier, highly capable civilization did indeed build the Sphinx during the age of Leo, what legacy did they leave? Could elements of their knowledge and symbols have filtered down through subsequent cultures, transforming, adapting, until they resurfaced in the Old Kingdom? Perhaps the later pharaohs weren't so much commissioning a new Sphinx, but rediscovering, clearing and re-identifying with an immensely ancient monument, imbuing it with their own religious and political significance, perhaps even recarving the head to feature their own likeness upon an already ancient lion body. The face we see, though majestic, sometimes appears subtly disproportionate to the colossal body. This observation feeds into the speculation that the head might have been reshaped or significantly recarved from an earlier form, possibly that of a full lion, into the more anthropomorphic pharaonic visage we behold today. This gentle inquiry into stylistic choices, too, contributes to the deep tapestry of possible histories. Let us consider, then, the silent, intimate whispers of the stone itself. Imagine standing very close to the Sphinx, perhaps in a rare, quiet moment, observing the minute details of its carved surface. The face, serene yet powerfully authoritative, the distinct contours of the royal Nemes headdress that frames it, and the now damaged uraeus cobra once adorning its brow. These are the touches of human artistry that define its immediate appearance. For many years, comparing the sculptural style of the Sphinx's face to known Old Kingdom artwork, particularly portraiture of Khafre, has been a cornerstone of the conventional dating. Take, for instance, the facial characteristics. When placed side by side with accepted statues of Khafre, many Egyptologists see strong resemblances. The prominent cheekbones, the almond-shaped eyes, the shape of the mouth, the structure of the ears, and the particular style of the Nemes headdress, which closely matches that found on other royal representations of Khafre from his reign. The craftsmanship speaks of the high art prevalent during the 4th dynasty, a time of artistic maturation and exceptional skill in stone carving. This stylistic analysis argues for continuity, showing that the Sphinx fits neatly into the aesthetic and iconographic repertoire of its conventionally assigned era. The sheer perfection and iconic nature of its features are consistent with the masterpieces of the Old Kingdom. However, just as a ripple can expand across calm water, a question has gently persisted regarding the head-to-body proportion of the Sphinx. Observe the overall form. The colossal body of the lion stretches out, a massive sweep of stone, powerful and elongated. But when you look at the head, does it seem to your inner eye entirely proportionate to the monumental size of the body? Some observers have suggested that the head appears relatively small in comparison to the scale of the lion's body, giving it a somewhat top-heavy or perhaps a subtly mismatched appearance. This seemingly minor visual discrepancy has led to one of the more thought-provoking theories related to the Sphinx's age, the possibility of recarving. Imagine if the body of the lion was indeed carved millennia earlier from the formidable natural limestone outcrop. In that ancient epoch, it might have featured a complete lion's head, perfectly in proportion to its powerful physique. The lion, a symbol of immense power, courage, and solar connection, was deeply revered across various ancient cultures, perhaps even predating dynastic Egypt. Then, fast forward to the Old Kingdom. A pharaoh, perhaps Khafre, might have come across this already ancient, powerful, yet possibly weather-worn, full-bodied lion. Seeing its monumental grandeur and sacred presence, and wanting to associate it with his own eternal legacy, he might have ordered the existing lion's head to be recarved. The artisans of the Old Kingdom, with their exquisite skill, would then have painstakingly sculpted the pharaoh's own face onto the enduring body, replacing the original animal head. This recarving hypothesis offers an elegant solution to several intriguing observations. Firstly, it accounts for the perceived disproportion. Carving away existing stone inevitably reduces the overall volume. Taking a full lion's head and sculpting a human head from it, particularly one that maintains royal characteristics, would inherently result in a slightly smaller, more refined head relative to the enormous bulk of the original lion's body. Secondly, it offers an explanation for the severe weathering on the body of the Sphinx and the surrounding enclosure walls, which appears more significant than on the face itself. The softer limestone layers used for the body would naturally suffer more extensive damage over a much longer period of time, enduring thousands of years of rain and environmental stress, before the head was reshaped and perhaps somewhat protected. The harder capstone on the Sphinx's head might have made it less susceptible to surface erosion to begin with, or the recarving process itself could have removed heavily weathered stone, giving the face a younger appearance compared to its venerable body. The act of recarving ancient monuments was not unknown in Egyptian history. Pharaohs often usurped or repurposed the works of their predecessors, carving their own names or likenesses onto earlier statues. While the scale of recarving the Sphinx's head would be immense, the motivation to claim an ancient sacred symbol as one's own is perfectly aligned with pharaonic ambitions. It would effectively tie the immense power of an ancient guardian to the current monarch, bolstering his divine right and eternal legacy. Yet, this theory faces its own questions. The process of recarving a head on such a scale would be a massive undertaking. Are there any indications of an earlier, larger head structure? Could it have been damaged beyond recognition before recarving? These remain open areas of speculative inquiry, painting a more complex, multi-layered story for the Sphinx than a singular creation event. Furthermore, a detail often pondered is the presence of what is thought to be the uraeus, the sacred cobra symbol of pharaonic power, which would have originally adorned the Sphinx's brow. While much of it is now lost, the uraeus itself is an iconic symbol closely associated with royal authority, firmly embedded in dynastic Egyptian iconography. Would such a specific symbol have been absent on a prehistoric full lion form? This points towards the strong Egyptian association. However, if the head was recarved, the uraeus could have been added at that time, integrating it fully into the pharaonic narrative. In the subtle interplay of observed craftsmanship, stylistic comparisons, and perceived proportionality, the debate continues to ripple. It reminds us that monuments are not just inert objects, but active participants in the long dialogue of history. Their stories revealed layer by painstaking layer. The Sphinx, in its silent grandeur, seems to hold within its very fabric the echoes of multiple epochs, challenging us to look beyond immediate appearances and listen for the whispers of profound antiquity embedded in its magnificent form. And now, as we contemplate these magnificent physical clues etched in stone and sky, let us gently shift our focus to the intangible, to the ancient human narratives, the historical documents, and the profound absence of certain textual records. Imagine sitting in a sun-dappled scriptorium, unrolling a brittle papyrus scroll, the faint, earthy scent of ancient fibres rising into the air. In the silent language of inscriptions and the profound quiet of what isn't written, sometimes even grander narratives are born. One of the curious points that often arises in discussions of the Sphinx's origins is the perplexing lack of explicit contemporaneous records from the Old Kingdom regarding its construction. For a monument of such unprecedented scale, power, and presumed significance, directly linked to a pharaoh, one might reasonably expect some direct celebratory inscription or official documentation commemorating its creation. After all, the Egyptians were prolific record keepers. Stelae, temple walls, and tomb inscriptions routinely detailed the commissioning of monuments, the names of the pharaohs responsible, and often even the workforce involved. Yet the conventional archaeological record yields no direct, unequivocal founding stela for the Great Sphinx from the 4th dynasty. There is no triumphant inscription saying, "King Khafre built this mighty lion god to gaze eternally upon the dawn," or a list of architects and artisans directly detailing its carving. This absence, for some, is a profound and unsettling silence, particularly given the magnitude of the Sphinx. Contrast this with the records we do possess for other major monuments. The pyramids themselves, through their adjacent cemeteries for nobles and workers, and later papyri like the Wadi al-Jaf papyri, reveal aspects of their construction and administration. Even monuments attributed to later periods often have accompanying texts. So, the Sphinx, standing grandly beside Khafre's pyramid, yet lacking its birth certificate from that era, creates a narrative lacuna that some find hard to ignore. This silence leads to various interpretations. Mainstream Egyptology might suggest that such records existed, but were simply lost to the ravages of time, that perhaps the specific dedicatory texts were made on now vanished perishable materials, or simply that we haven't yet found them. After all, the archaeological record is incomplete, a mosaic with many missing pieces. Or perhaps the Sphinx was so intimately linked to Khafre's pyramid complex that its construction was simply understood as an inherent part of the greater project, needing no separate monumental proclamation. However, for those exploring the deep antiquity hypothesis, this textual silence is not merely an absence, but a presence of possibility. It allows room for an alternative story. What if the Sphinx was not built by Khafre, but merely restored or integrated by him into his complex? If it was an already existing, immensely old monument, its true origin faded into a pre-dynastic mist, then Khafre wouldn't have been building it. He would have been honouring it, perhaps clearing it from the encroaching sand, or even recarving its head to connect with his own reign, as we discussed earlier. In this scenario, there would be no reason for him to claim its original construction, only his interaction with it. This interpretation is subtly supported by a much later inscription, the aforementioned Dream Stela of Thutmose IV, dating to the New Kingdom, approximately 1400 BC, found between the paws of the Sphinx. As we recalled, this stela describes Thutmose IV clearing sand from the Sphinx, and implies that the Sphinx needed to be unearthed. Critically, the Dream Stela makes no claim that Thutmose IV built the Sphinx, nor does it explicitly mention Khafre as the builder. Instead, it refers to the Sphinx in its timeless divine role, suggesting it was already an ancient, venerable entity to which humans paid respect, not a monument whose exact origin was fresh in memory. The phrasing of the stela implies continuity and rededication rather than initial creation. Furthermore, another text often discussed in this context, albeit with significant controversy, is the inventory stela, also known as the Princess of the Inventory stela. This stela, unearthed near the Giza necropolis in the 19th century, describes certain ancient monuments being present before the time of King Khufu, Khafre's predecessor. Specifically, it talks about Khufu's efforts to rebuild a temple associated with Isis, and refers to the Sphinx itself, asserting that Khufu himself merely found, cleaned, and dedicated a statue already present on the site, stating explicitly that the Great Sphinx has existed since before for the time of Khufu. If genuine and accurate, this stela would directly contradict the conventional Old Kingdom attribution to Khafre. However, the inventory stela is largely dismissed by mainstream Egyptology as a forgery or a later New Kingdom copy, some say even a Ramesside period piece, made much later in time, intended to exaggerate the antiquity and sanctity of local cult sites during a period of religious revival or political maneuvering. Its style of carving and inscription, along with its specific historical claims, differ from authentic Old Kingdom texts. The stela is viewed more as a fascinating piece of later mythology or local piety, rather than a reliable historical document for Fourth Dynasty events. Yet, the very existence of such a legend, even a fabricated one, within ancient Egyptian culture, hints at a persistent popular tradition or folk memory that perhaps felt the Sphinx was indeed much older than its immediate pyramid neighbours. The seeds of questioning were, perhaps, always quietly present within the deeper streams of local tradition. The question of why Old Kingdom pharaohs would choose not to overtly claim the construction of their grandest symbol remains a captivating puzzle. If the Sphinx was pre-dynastic, belonging to a more ancient epoch, perhaps the later Egyptians simply assimilated it, reinterpreting its original meaning within their own cosmology. This phenomenon is common in history. Conquering or succeeding cultures often integrate older, revered sites and symbols into their own framework, imbuing them with new significance while still recognizing their deep sacredness, the profound mystery of the Sphinx, its ancient silence, and the complex weave of human interpretation only deepens as we listen for the fainter echoes of earlier narratives. The entire topic of the Sphinx's age thus invites us to consider the fluid nature of history itself. What we call ancient is always relative, always expanding with new discoveries, new interpretations, and the application of new scientific disciplines. The Old Kingdom, magnificent as it was, now finds itself potentially preceded by layers of even deeper antiquity at Giza. The absence of specific written accounts, once seen as simply missing data, now becomes an open space for geological and astronomical narratives to gently unfold, offering different readings of time's long parchment. The Sphinx stands, a silent chronicle, daring us to expand our understanding of human ingenuity and spiritual aspiration across unimaginable spans of time. This tapestry of observation and speculation gently folds in upon itself, revealing an ancient world still vibrant with mysteries. The deeper we journey into the heart of this enigma, the clearer it becomes that the Great Sphinx of Giza is not merely a monumental carving. It is a profound historical palimpsest, a stone parchment written upon, erased, and rewritten by the shifting sands of millennia. The enduring fascination with the Sphinx, its unblinking gaze fixed eternally upon the rising sun, is not solely due to its sheer size or the awe-inspiring engineering required for its creation. It is the palpable sense of a deeper, untold story, a silent witness to epochs lost to conventional memory. Whether one holds firmly to the long-standing archaeological consensus of an Old Kingdom origin, or is compelled by the powerful whispers of the alternative theories suggesting an almost unimaginable antiquity, The journey through the evidence and interpretations itself becomes an act of contemplation. Let us gather the various threads of this exploration into a gentle, meditative reflection. The strength of the traditional Egyptological view lies in its robust foundation, carefully built over generations of dedicated research. It aligns the Sphinx gracefully with the monumental projects of the Fourth Dynasty, particularly with King Khafre. The visual proximity, the shared architectural techniques in its associated temples, the stylistic resemblances to Khafre's known portraiture, these are not easily dismissed. They speak of a period of astonishing creative power, where a unified vision transformed the landscape with awe-inspiring artistry. The consensus emphasizes cultural continuity, situating the Sphinx within the understood arc of early dynastic Egypt, a time when kings were both temporal rulers and divine conduits, whose eternal image guarded the pathways to the heavens. And yet, alongside this powerful current flow the more ancient tributaries, hinting at profound depths. The geological argument, spearheaded by Dr. Schock's work, points to the unmistakable vertical erosion patterns on the Sphinx enclosure walls. This specific kind of deep, pervasive water weathering seems to demand periods of significant, sustained rainfall, climatic conditions that last existed in Giza not 4,500 years ago, but some 7,000 to 12,000 years ago, during a greener, wetter Sahara. The stone itself, this oldest and most patient of witnesses, appears to bear the undeniable signature of these long-lost hydrological cycles, gently suggesting that the carving predates the Old Kingdom by many thousands of years. It invites us to consider a world long before pharaohs, where different climate patterns shaped the land and perhaps equally capable, yet entirely forgotten, human hands shaped the stone. The astronomical alignment with the age of Leo in the spring equinox around 10,500 BC offers another layer to this profound chronology. The image of the earthly lion gazing towards its celestial counterpart as the sun rose on the vernal equinox creates a captivating celestial timestamp. This precise alignment, interwoven with the scientific understanding of the precession of the equinoxes, hints at a profound, sophisticated knowledge of cosmology, embedded not just in theory, but in monumental terrestrial architecture. This perspective speaks of an advanced, symbolic intelligence that could conceive of and execute such a timeless marker, connecting the Earth with the far reaches of the cosmos across vast stretches of time. Even the quieter debates about the head's proportion, the stylistic nuances, or the curious silence of explicit Old Kingdom foundation texts, all contribute to this rich tapestry. If the Sphinx's head was indeed recarved, or if it indeed predated the official historical record, then it complicates the smooth, singular narrative. It forces us to ask, what if the later dynastic Egyptians did not create it, but inherited it, respected it, integrated it into their own belief systems, and perhaps even modified it? This acknowledges the persistence of ancient sacred places and symbols, often absorbed and reinterpreted by successive cultures. The debate around the Great Sphinx of Giza, then, is not simply a squabble over dates or methodologies. It is a powerful reminder of how human understanding evolves, how new evidence and cross-disciplinary thinking can challenge deeply entrenched beliefs, and how even the most established histories might possess forgotten chapters. It is a dialogue between the patient observations of geology, the meticulous analysis of archaeology, and the cosmic ballet revealed by astronomy. What becomes clear is that the Sphinx holds many truths, depending on how and where we look. Its stone has been touched by many eras, many intentions, and many interpretations. Whether one accepts its Old Kingdom attribution or leans towards the more ancient hypotheses, its magnificent presence continues to hold secrets within its enduring form. It asks us, with its quiet gaze, to cultivate patience, to approach understanding with humility, and to embrace the rich complexity of history itself. The Sphinx continues to teach us about time, not as a linear progression, but as layers within layers, like the very strata of limestone from which it emerged. It reminds us that our present understanding is but a flickering moment in its vast history, and that new revelations, like seeds stirring beneath the desert sands, might always be waiting to gently emerge, changing our perceptions yet again. This mighty creature, a hybrid of strength and wisdom, remains an ultimate riddle, a profound invitation to forever keep asking, to forever keep contemplating, and to forever remain open to the ancient whispers from the depths of time itself. The true age of the Sphinx, perhaps, remains a secret it guards closely, only slowly unveiling its vast and profound story to those willing to listen to the whispers of stone and sky. It continues its long vigil, forever holding the profound stillness of forgotten ages within its heart of enduring stone. And so we arrive at a place of quiet contemplation, allowing the whispers of the past to settle around us. We have journeyed through the intricate arguments, felt the keen edges of scientific debate, and imagined the patient hand of time sculpting stone beneath an ancient sky. Looking across all of this, a deeper tapestry begins to reveal itself, not just of a singular monument or its disputed chronology, but of humanity's timeless dialogue with the world around us, and with the elusive nature of knowledge itself. When we step back from the specific layers of limestone and the calculated angles of erosion, we begin to perceive a broader landscape, one shaped by questions that reach far beyond the sands of Giza. The enigma of the Great Sphinx, its true age shrouded in competing narratives, becomes a powerful symbol. It speaks to our innate human need to understand origins, to trace the lineage of creation, to find a beginning point for that which endures. This profound need to connect with the deep past, to hear the echoes of ancestral voices in ancient stones, is a fundamental thread woven through every culture. In the quiet spaces between the geologist's chisel and the archaeologist's trowel, between the established texts and the compelling visual evidence, there lies a gentle tension. It is the tension inherent in all profound human inquiry, the dance between what we know with certainty, what we infer with logical reasoning, and what we might intuitively feel in our bones when confronted by something so undeniably ancient, so monumentally powerful. This is not a battle of right or wrong, but a living, evolving conversation that stretches across centuries, echoing in the hushed halls of academia and across dinner tables of those captivated by ancient wonders. Consider the very act of seeking an older age for the Sphinx. It represents more than a scholarly correction. It embodies a beautiful, audacious willingness to re-examine our foundational stories. History, as we often encounter it, can feel set in stone, a linear narrative handed down through generations. Yet the Sphinx, perhaps more than any other single monument, softly invites us to reconsider the bedrock of that narrative, suggesting that there might be chapters we've overlooked, pages torn, or even entire books waiting to be discovered beneath the sands of our collective memory. This re-evaluation, this gentle prodding at the edges of accepted wisdom, is a vital pulsation in the heart of human understanding. It reminds us that knowledge is not a stagnant pool, but a flowing river, constantly refreshed by new observations, new technologies, and indeed, new ways of seeing the very evidence that has always been before us. The profound allure of the potentially much older Sphinx connects to a deeper human yearning, the desire for a grander past, a more ancient civilization, an epoch beyond our most diligently chronicled records. There is a sense of awe, even a humble spiritual elevation, in the notion that beings so far removed from our known history could have envisioned and carved such an enduring sentinel. This stretching of the temporal canvas backward, if only in possibility, forces us to re-evaluate our position in the stream of time, shrinking our own brief moments into perspective against millennia upon millennia. It gently reminds us that human consciousness, in various forms, has traversed unimaginable stretches of history, and that the story of our journey might be far richer and more complex than we currently imagine. And when we gaze upon that leonine body, the human face peering eastward, it is not merely stone we behold, but the patient record of immense natural forces. The profound insight of the water erosion hypothesis lies in its invitation to view the monument as part of an inseparable dialogue between human creation and the elemental power of nature. The wind, the rain, the rising and receding waters of ancient epochs. These are not just incidental details, but characters in the Sphinx's grand, silent saga. They are the unseen hands that have sculpted, softened, and slowly worn down its surface over vast durations. This connection regrounds the colossal artificial form in the enduring processes of the earth, weaving it into a cycle of decay and preservation that humbles the most ambitious human projects. It's a soft reminder that even the most monumental works of human ingenuity are ultimately embraced, shaped, and slowly reclaimed by the greater, more ancient rhythms of the planet. This interplay between human purpose and natural process can be profoundly meditative to consider. The sheer persistence of the Sphinx, its ability to withstand not just centuries but potentially millennia of weathering, speaks to an incredible foresight, a monumental undertaking that implicitly understood the very fabric of the Giza Plateau, whether the water erosion occurred during a rainy period shortly after construction, or during an incredibly ancient era preceding dynastic Egypt. The monument stands as a testament to the chosen stone, its resistance, and the continuous conversation between form and entropy. It silently poses the question, what did those early builders truly understand about the geological landscape they sculpted? What secrets of enduring construction did they possess that allowed their work to remain, a stoic guardian through vast geological and climatic shifts? Looking across all of this, the debate about the Sphinx's age becomes a mirror, reflecting our own methods of inquiry. We gather evidence, we meticulously analyze, we compare and contrast, always seeking the coherent narrative, the single elegant explanation that threads all the disparate observations together. Yet, the Sphinx stands as a gentle, persistent reminder that not all threads easily weave into a preconceived pattern. Some elements resist, some suggest entirely different looms. This process of attempting to resolve such an enigma pushes the boundaries of our various disciplines. Geology lends its vast timelines, archaeology offers its meticulous chronology, art history its insights into style, engineering its understanding of construction. Each brings its unique lens, and the ongoing, often fervent discussion among them enriches our collective understanding, even if a final, universally accepted answer remains tantalizingly out of reach. The passion evoked by this topic, sometimes approaching the fervent, also illuminates a deeper human truth, our relationship with narratives. When an explanation becomes deeply embedded, passed down through generations of scholarship, it forms part of our cultural and intellectual landscape. To propose a radical shift in that landscape, to suggest an older origin that rewrites significant portions of the story, touches not just upon facts, but upon identity. The story of dynastic Egypt, as we generally understand it, is magnificent and powerful. To suggest a pre-dynastic or even pre-human origin for its most iconic sentinel subtly shifts the perceived cradle of civilization, or at least hints at unknown predecessors. This emotional connection to historical narratives is a potent force, reminding us that knowledge is rarely purely objective, but is intertwined with the human stories we tell ourselves about who we are and where we come from. In this way, the Great Sphinx offers a profound lesson in intellectual humility. Faced with such an ancient, ambiguous, and yet undeniable presence, we are called to embrace uncertainty, to tolerate the unfinished story, to revel in the very act of inquiry rather than demand instant, definitive answers. It encourages us to hold competing ideas gently, side by side, appreciating the logic and passion behind each, recognizing that the complete truth might be more layered and nuanced than any single explanation can fully encompass. This space of gentle ambiguity is not a void to be feared, but a fertile ground for imagination and ongoing discovery. It ensures that the Sphinx continues to live, not merely as a stone relic, but as a living question mark, forever prompting us to look closer, to think deeper, to consider the possibilities that lie just beyond the horizon of our current understanding. The idea of the Sphinx predating conventional timelines opens a vast mental landscape, stirring within us a sense of ancient memory, a faint echo of worlds that once were. Imagine the sheer expanse of time needed for climate to shift so dramatically in Egypt that substantial rainfall carved its lasting marks onto the Giza plateau. Such a vision extends our mental calendar back, not by mere centuries, but by many thousands of years, potentially transporting us to a time when different forms of life and climate shaped the very land that now holds our greatest mysteries. It allows for a breathtaking glimpse into the immense patience of geological change, juxtaposed against the relatively fleeting moments of human civilizations that rise and fall, leaving only fragments for us to discover. The Sphinx then becomes not just a statue, but a time capsule, patiently waiting for our consciousness to catch up with its true narrative. Perhaps this profound ambiguity is precisely the Sphinx's enduring gift. In an age often defined by the demand for immediate answers and perfect clarity, the Sphinx stands resolute in its mystery, an unhurried, silent master of time. It allows us to contemplate the boundaries of our scientific instruments, the limits of our historical records, and the vast oceans of information we have yet to navigate. It grounds us in the very real experience of facing the unknown, prompting wonder rather than anxiety, encouraging a sustained engagement with questions that might span generations. This patience, this quiet insistence on complexity, offers a calming antidote to the rushing pace of modern life, inviting us to slow down, to breathe, and to simply behold. The narrative around the Sphinx also touches upon the continuity of human expression and purpose. Regardless of when it was carved, its creation speaks to an immense drive, the drive to monumentalize, to commemorate, to leave an indelible mark upon the landscape for those who would follow. Whether built by dynastic pharaohs or by an earlier unknown culture, the intention behind such an undertaking transcends time itself. It is the impulse to impose meaning upon a landscape, to create a guardian, a symbol, a testament to belief and power that defies erosion and the creeping sands. This deep, almost primal desire to craft enduring meaning is a universal human trait, and the Sphinx is perhaps its most eloquent, most ancient spokesperson. In its role as a potential bridge to an unknown epoch, the Sphinx softly challenges our definitions of ancient. If its face indeed witnessed skies perhaps 10 millennia or more distant from our own, it then becomes a direct link, an enduring eye fixed on events we cannot even fully conceive. This concept brings a palpable sense of both vastness and intimacy. Vastness in the time frame, intimacy in the direct, continuous gaze of this single entity from then until now. It reminds us that our present is merely one slender thread in an immeasurably long, unbroken line of moments. And in that humbling realization, there is a gentle, comforting perspective that we too are part of this grand continuation, fleeting witnesses to monuments that outlast our brief individual stories, connecting us to all who have stood before them, wondering and reflecting. This slow unfolding of potential new truths, the gentle push against the established framework, echoes a grander process at play across all human sciences. It shows how the past is not fixed, but is constantly being reinterpreted, like a precious manuscript whose faded script is continually being brought to light with new techniques, new lenses, new insights. Each re-examination is an act of respectful engagement with what has come before, an earnest attempt to hear more clearly, to see more fully. The Sphinx, in this regard, serves as a magnificent case study for the fluid, dynamic nature of historical understanding itself. It whispers of an ongoing dialogue rather than a concluded statement. Ultimately, the gentle presence of the Sphinx, regardless of its exact vintage, prompts us to look inward, to consider our own relationship with time. Are we defined by our brief moments, or by the grand tapestry of human endeavour that stretches behind and before us? Do we embrace the mysteries that challenge our current perceptions, or do we shy away from the vastness of the unknown? The Sphinx, silent and eternal, does not offer direct answers, but it masterfully provides the space, the monumental backdrop against which we might begin to ponder such questions. With an open heart and a curious mind, it remains, quietly presiding over the shifting sands, a patient tutor in the art of profound observation, and an eternal reminder that the deepest truths often unveil themselves slowly across the long, silent passages of time. In the contemplation of its enduring presence, we find a peculiar serenity. The notion that such an edifice might have observed eras when savanna grasses rather than desert sands carpeted Giza, when rain-fed ancient rivers where only dust now lies, paints a picture of a planet, alive with dynamic, transformative power. This vision ties the solitary figure of the Sphinx not just to human history, but to the broader, awe-inspiring saga of Earth's geological and climatic evolution. It connects us with a sense of wonder and humility to the grand elemental forces that shape landscapes and societies alike. We are, in a profound sense, inheritors of these colossal stories, and the Sphinx invites us to listen to them more deeply, to understand their rhythms, and to appreciate the intricate dance between fleeting human endeavour and the eternal sweep of natural phenomena. It stands as a beacon for a wider understanding, gently encouraging us to consider not just who built it, but what enduring principles its ancient origins might quietly reveal about the world we inhabit. And so we find ourselves, as the desert sky deepens to an impossible indigo, and the first hesitant stars begin their ancient dance, at the quiet close of our journey. We have traversed shifting sands of theory and evidence, paused before the majestic gaze of the Sphinx, and sought to understand the whispers of its true age, a quest that has taken us through geological observations, archaeological findings, and the profound, often conflicting narratives spun around this monumental sentinel of stone. We felt the brush of winds that shaped its form over millennia, traced the contours of debates, and contemplated the weight of time that presses upon its unblinking eyes. In the gentle afterglow of these explorations, it is not merely the question of a definitive date that lingers, but the profound resonance of the enigma itself. We set out to ask, how old is the Great Sphinx? And while the answer remains etched in mysteries deeper than any single excavation can reveal, the very act of asking, of seeking, of pondering, has unveiled a richer tapestry. It has shown us not only the monumental scale of ancient ingenuity and the painstaking work of scientific inquiry, but also the delicate dance between human ambition and the relentless, patient artistry of nature. The Sphinx, in its silent steadfastness, becomes a mirror reflecting our persistent fascination with the past, our desire to chart the untrackable currents of time, and perhaps our deepest need to feel connected to something grander, something that stretches beyond the brief flicker of a human life. As we bring this chapter to a soft landing, allow your thoughts to drift away from the sharp edges of argument and the insistent clamour of facts. Instead, let them settle upon the quiet endurance of the Sphinx itself. Imagine, for a moment, the desert air growing cool around you, the faint, distant calls of evening creatures echoing across the sands, and the silhouette of that ancient beast against the velvety backdrop of night. Its form, sculpted by wind and sand, by sun and rain, speaks a language far older than hieroglyphs, a language of stone and shadow, of patience and profound observation. It has witnessed epochs rise and fall like tides on a vast ocean. It has felt the sun of countless dawns warm its monumental face, and known the chill of innumerable desert nights. Its gaze has met that of pharaohs, explorers, philosophers, and dreamers, each one asking, in their own way, "What secrets do you hold?" The beauty of such ancient mysteries is not always in their resolution, but in the spaciousness they create within us. They are not merely puzzles to be solved, but profound invitations to wonder, to imagine, to embrace the magnificent scope of the unknown. To truly contemplate the age of the Sphinx, in whatever light you choose to view it, is to grapple with forces far beyond our immediate comprehension. Geological time, the subtle erosion of vast landscapes, the slow, relentless shaping power of water and wind across millennia. It is to feel the weight of deep time pressing in, humbling us with the realization that our most cherished historical markers are mere blinks in the cosmic eye, and that the greatest story is still being told, with chapters so ancient they predate the very notion of a beginning. Perhaps, in the end, the question of the Sphinx's exact age is secondary to the feeling it evokes. Does it matter, in the quiet of a contemplative moment, whether it stood gazing over the desert 4,500 years ago, or 10,000, or even longer? What truly resonates is its enduring presence, its symbolic weight, and the silent question mark it has carved into the very landscape of human history. It stands as a guardian of silence, a custodian of forgotten wisdom, whispering tales of lost civilizations not through words, but through the profound melancholic beauty of its weathered form. Its deep lines and soft curves tell a story of countless sunsets and moonrises, of dust storms that raged and cleared, of the silent, infinitesimal shifts that constitute eternity. Think of the desert, vast and patient. It teaches us about scale, about the slow, deliberate work of time. A grain of sand, an aeon of sun and wind, and gradually monuments are smoothed, mountains are worn, and riverbeds are etched into existence. The Sphinx, this monumental, enduring creature, embodies this very process. Its face, whether chiselled by dynastic Egyptians or sculpted by even more ancient, unrecorded hands, bears the undeniable signature of elemental forces. The erosion, the subtle rounding of its features, the gentle wear that softens its once sharp contours, these are not merely defects of age, but testimonials. They are the beautiful imperfections left by the grandest sculptor of all, time itself, assisted by its tireless apprentices, wind and water. As the quiet gathers around you, and the images of Giza recede into the soft edges of memory, allow your mind to hold this gentle truth: that some stories are never fully concluded, not because we lack diligence, but because their depth surpasses the finite capacity of our current understanding. And in that embrace of the unfinished, the unsolved, lies a particular, serene comfort. The Sphinx invites us to rest in this space of beautiful uncertainty. It does not demand answers, but encourages introspection. It doesn't scream for attention, but asks for quiet reverence. Its lesson, perhaps, is about the virtue of enduring presence, the power of stillness, and the profound beauty that lies in a mystery gently held rather than fiercely conquered. And perhaps that is its greatest gift, not the unlocking of a single secret, but the unfolding of 1,000 potential narratives within us, not the resolution of its origin, but the way it expands our perception of time, of art, of human striving, and of the forces that shape our world beyond our immediate gaze. The Sphinx becomes an anchor, not of certainty but of wonder, holding us gently in the currents of cosmic time, inviting us to contemplate the vastness that came before us, and the deep, silent wisdom embedded in the very earth beneath our feet. In the stillness of this moment, as you settle deeper into your own space, wherever you may be, carry with you the image of this great guardian, its eyes fixed on an eternal horizon, forever observing, forever listening. May its quiet strength, its profound mystery, and its gentle patience imbue your own journey with a sense of wonder and calm. Remember that some of the deepest truths are not shouted but whispered, not proven but felt, residing in the heart of the unspoken, much like the timeless secrets of the Sphinx. And so, as the night embraces the desert and dreams begin their gentle weaving, rest well, dear explorer. Allow the peace of these ancient mysteries to settle upon you like soft moonlight. Until we next meet in this cozy corner of contemplation, may your nights be tranquil and your days filled with gentle discovery. Good night.